Hey friends, this is Marilyn from tarotclarity.com. I also wanted to touch base on the Cobberger hearing that happened yesterday when, for those of you who are not familiar with the Cobberger case, this occurred in November of 2022. A Mass M a seriously deranged individual broke into the home where 4 college students lived in Idaho. Their names were Madison Mogan, Kaylee Consalves, Xana Carnoodle, and Ethan Chapin. And he brutally massacred the 4 of them, leaving 2 surviving roommates, one of whom saw the intruder when he was in the house, but because he was decked out from head to toe in black, including a baklava kind of hat that featured only his eyes, all that young woman could describe was his general build, that he was athletic but not necessarily muscular, and that he had bushy eyebrows. Well, as it turns out, it doesn't pinpoint exactly. I mean, that description could fit a lot of people, but it doesn't exclude the individual who was eventually arrested for the crime. And as it turned out, asked for a plea to be spared the death sentence, which was in Idaho is the firing squad. Now, when this happened, it hit me like a ton of bricks. You know, it had the same kind of impact or sensational, what the, that the Manson's murders did in '69. I was alive for that. I was a kid, but I remember it. I was 11 years old. And it was horrifying because the thought of somebody coming into your home and then stabbing you is just about the most horrific nightmare anybody can have. I mean, when we have these horrible, scary movies, it's usually somebody yielding a knife, because that's about the scariest way, I think. And so at any rate, all along, the culprit, as it turns out he is the culprit, maintained he would be exonerated. His defense attorney, who's doing her job, maintained he was innocent, and they 100% believed in his innocence. I don't know how they possibly could with the overwhelming evidence against him. And then toward the end, when they were desperately trying to indicate that that there was another individual who might have done it, despite the evidence and despite realizing that he had to have been guilty, because all their efforts were last-ditch efforts to spare him the death penalty and get him off the hook, they were willing to throw innocent people under the bus. I don't know what went down, but then, because we were expecting the trial, that the jury to be selected towards the end of July, and that the trial would begin mid-August. And I was there for it. I wanted to see how this worked out, And then suddenly, like Monday or Tuesday, we found out that he was pleading for, he wanted to plead guilty. So, and the prosecution, to the chagrin of some of the families, agreed that it was a good course of action, and so they accepted his plea, no parole, and no chance of appeals. I mean, he'll just rot in prison for the rest of his life, but he has been spared the death sentence. So I'm kind of curious, like everybody, and I have done a number of readings on this on video. I have a playlist of, and I'll put the playlist down below if I think of it. And I stand behind every reading I've done on this topic. But I'd like to know what was what was it that persuaded the defense team to just do their last Hail Mary to request a guilty plea. I'd like to know what it was. We didn't learn anything at the hearing. His parents, who had never come out, as far as the public knows, for anything regarding any of his hearings or any of his, court hearings, showed up for this one. And the families, some of the family members of the victims showed up. I don't know if the two surviving roommates were present. I'm not sure. But I'm sure it's a great relief to them in particular, because I'm sure that the defense was probably going to try to destroy them during the trial. So I'm sure it's a great relief to those two roommates. And it is a relief to some of the families. Some of the families indicated that they were on board for the plea, because with a DP in America, you can say in theory, oh, you're getting the DP, but it could take 30 years, before it happens, because he'll have an ability to string it along with appealing that this wasn't done properly. So by vanquishing the possibility of parole or appeals, it's as good a indicator that he's going to spend the rest of his life behind bars. He'll never be free. And in a high secure, in a high, not security, but in a high, in a prison for violent offenders, they may find a way to dole out justice after all in their own way. If somebody decides that he's a great target. So at any rate, I'm just curious to know it's interesting, the card that flipped over. What was the turning point? What was it that made the defense team convince him, or maybe he just asked for it? What was the straw that broke the camel's back that made them realize this was it? This was the last thing to do. Curious. The gag order has not been lifted. It's ridiculous, but they're keeping it until his sentencing, when the judge has accepted the plea, but there's a sentencing hearing, which I guess will indicate what the judge would like. Like to get some information from him. But what was the straw that broke the camel's back? What caused the defense team to accept a plea of guilt? Ace of Cups, 7 Swords, and Judgment. Wow. So this card suggests to me that they were convinced by whatever maybe hasn't been revealed yet. We'll look at this to see what insight we might get, but they were convinced that he would be revealed as a guilty individual. This is a card of accounting for your crime, accounting for your sins. We have 7 and 1 would be 8, so their combination, it's not a quint card per se, but that combination of cards suggests justice, that they would be, it wouldn't go well for them in court. Now we do have 8 and 20, which would be 28 minus 22 would be the Lover card. So 28 minus 22 would be 6. I wonder if his parents might not have had an influence on him. I don't imagine that he had any compassion or consideration for his family at all. But it's possible that his parents might have convinced him that it was in his best interest. to do this. I say that because I believe that there were some family members, I don't know for a fact, but it's been suggested that some family members, it could have been his sisters, it could have even been his parents, were going to be witnesses for the prosecution. And, they may have convinced him, look, one of us or more than one of us might be presenting for the prosecution, and it's going to seal your fate. It's not going to look good. Not all of his family members may have been interested in preserving his innocence. They may have been sure of his guilt, and that might have been it. It may have been family members who suggested in a big way that it really won't look good if we are witnesses for the prosecution. Maybe the parents would not have been, but maybe the sisters might have. That's very interesting, isn't it? Let's do another reading or two on the topic. Alrighty. Now, as I mentioned, the gag order will not be lifted. I mean, there's no reason for it not to be lifted, but the prosecution asked that the gag order remain in place until July 23rd, when his sentence hearing occurs. So we didn't find out anything yesterday. What we learned was that he admitted freely that he was the perpetrator, that he deliberately, willfully committed the crime. So it's a confession. Now, some people say, let me flip the camera. Now, some people may argue, well, innocent people plead guilty all the time. True. But they don't plead guilty. They plead guilty if it means they'll get a lesser sentence. They plead guilty if it means they'll get 5 years instead of 10 or something like that. Okay, true. He's pleading guilty because he doesn't want to die, the freaking coward that he is. He had no problem taking the lives of 4 human beings, but, he's a coward. So there's that. But he's also signing away any chance of it ever being free, and he'll be a target in prison because he's the prize in prison. He's the most sensational, he's one of the more violent people in the prison. So he would be a feather in the cap of another sickie in prison, wouldn't he? So I don't know that you would normally see that as a good reason to plead guilty, other than the fact that he believed that he was going to be found guilty and he wanted to avoid the DP. So, and it wasn't an offered plea. It was, I did this. It was an admission of guilt. No chance of parole, no chance for appeal. Just a done deal. Having said that, I'd like to know what might be brought to the surface when the hearing comes, the sentencing comes out, when the gag order is lifted. I'd like to know what secrets or what details might really surprise us, or that we might learn that might be shocking. That might have been the straw. That might actually have been the straw that broke the camel's back. Let's see. And again, I'm using the Marseille Classic. What's it called? The Tarocco Marsiglia Classico by Il Meneghelli, published by Il Meneghello, in 1988. Two batons. Knight of Swords. Wow. So maybe he went there. This might be him. He went there with the intention of someone that he thought he bonded with or couldn't bond with, but it ended up being a mass thing.
So there was no, maybe there was not an intent originally to hurt as many people, kill as many people as he did. Let's call it for what it was. So we have 2 and 9. I think that's 9. Yes. 2, and that's like saturation point, right? I mean, it was like above and beyond what he expected to do, which is what I think this represents. So we have 11. So let me pull the 11th card, which would be fortitude. Oh yeah, he used much more force. Oh my gosh, look, it's the top card or the bottom card. So yeah, he was called upon to do more force. So, maybe the only thing we'll learn is that he did not intend originally to do so much damage. Wow. He's distancing himself from that. His intent was different maybe. Oh man. What other thing might we learn? That's pretty basic. I think most of us probably realize that he probably was targeting one of the young women, and the others, unfortunately for them, were at the wrong place at the wrong time, and the matter escalated. What other things? I'll go off. I just wanted to shuffle a few times on camera. What other things might come out? Okay, remember once the gag order is lifted, what other details might come out? And it may take years before we learn things, but I hope that people who were part of the community and their friends and anybody who had information, who knew things, that maybe, maybe they can bring some light to it. We don't want to know the gory details. I mean, I think it stands for itself that it was a hideous event, but just what are some of the details that would have sealed his fate that will come out? Well, interesting. Ooh, that's interesting, isn't it? Let me add these up. So we have 13 plus 7, that's 20. And 10 is 30. Minus 22, which is how I do it, which is justice. Wow, that's interesting. Boy, wow, and here it is. Justice keeps popping up today in all my reads. Isn't that interesting? Alrighty, how many of you have started typing? It's not justice, Marilyn. It's judgment. So you don't have to do that because I caught my mistake, which is even more interesting because I think that this suggests that there is one thing that we're not aware of that was the straw that broke the camel's back, or the last nail in the coffin. Something that would have been brought out, that will be brought out, that would have probably guaranteed a guilty verdict. And like I said before, it could have had something to do with his loved ones. It could have, been something that his family might have, if they were witnesses for the prosecution, they might have supplied the fatal blow. But this does look to me that it's a fatal blow, that there'll be something released that would have been the fatal blow, and he knew it. And the time was up. The 7 and the 10, 17, if we look at it like that, it would be the star card, card could be enlightenment. So something will be brought to light. That would have been the last straw for him. It could have been his parents. It could have been something else. Well, it remains to be seen. Was this a third read or was this a second read? I'm not sure. Let's try to do one more. And throughout all of this, we cannot lose sight of the 4 individuals. I think I mentioned their name in the beginning of the video, but Madison Mogan, Kaylee Gonsalves, Xana Carnodal, and Ethan Chabin must not be forgotten. And their families, we need to pray for them. They're all grieving in their own way. Some of them were
glad for the guilty plea because it frees, it allows them to move forward in their grief, As long as you're fighting and you're like constantly fighting and fighting the appeals and you're fighting the parole and you're going back every couple of years, I guess for some it might feel like it gives them a purpose to continue to fight, and to, do something for their loved one. But I think it also precludes them from dealing with the grief, It's like if you're fighting and you feel like you're doing something, it's keeping you busy, it's keeping you occupied, it's keeping you feeling like you're doing something. But with it settled, with a plea, with a deal like this, there's no more fighting to do, and you're forced to deal with the grief that may have been postponed. I'm not a psychologist, but I kind of understand people. I've met a lot of people in this line of work, and I understand. I've grieved. I've grieved. So we have to remember to keep all of them in prayer, all of them. And I'm not sure what the last read should be on. Let me think. I guess one thing that everybody wants to understand is what makes a monster like that. Watching him in the courtroom was chilling. When the judge asked, "Did you do this?" And he asked each individual persons by name, "Did you willfully, with malice and forethought and premeditation," or whatever the language was, "did you do this?" He just said, "Yes, I did. Yes, yes." Like he was just saying, "Yeah, I want one of those, do you want cream in your coffee?" Yes. It was just so matter of, there was no remorse. There was nothing like, "Gosh, yes, I did this. I'm so sorry." Nothing. It was like, this is in my best interest and this is what I want to do. It was chilling. And he has a very pronounced brow bone, and he had bushy eyebrows, but I think that the pronounced eyebrow that he has really accentuated that the eyebrows were bushy. And he clearly, he got a real close shave. He had the prison person did a real tight haircut and obviously shaved his eyebrows. But we know for a fact that he had bushy eyebrows on the day of the M's because within a few hours of having done it, he took a selfie of himself, proud of his work, with very bushy eyebrows. That was before he realized anybody saw his bushy eyebrows. So I think my question is the unknowable. What created this monster? What was? It's probably a lot of things, It's genetics. It's impressions. It's defective wiring. I don't know what kind of answer we're going to get on this one, but I think we just want to know what could create a monster like this. He's not the only one. There's lots of monsters here. What creates such a monster? What kind of ingredient creates such psychopathy, however it's pronounced? I'm not sure the correct.
So what created this particular monster? They might have, more than one feature, and this is an unknowable thing, I'm sure. But we're all grasping at straws trying to figure stuff like this out. Judgment. Something that made an impression on him in childhood. Something that made an impression on him in childhood. And he was a recluse. He was a reclusive person. So he was the kind of person that would be very inward with experiences as a child. So we have 20 and 9. 29 minus 22 is 7. Interesting. The car, the chariot. Sorry about that, guys. The more times I push the button to pause, the more chances there are that I'll screw it up. So if you're with me this long, this will be the last reading. Oh my goodness. There we go. So let me check it again. 29 minus 22 is 7, the Chariot. So, something that happened in childhood that he reflects upon. There must have been something big that made a grand impression on him when he was a child, that in retrospect, it made him introverted, made him introspective. He was just that way in the first place, but it was just the ingredient to send him over the edge. Now the Chariot, that's an interesting quint card. Could have been a car accident. I mean, it might not have just been one thing, but something that made an incredible impression upon a youth. But maybe there was some damage to his head or something, and it made him extremely introverted, or because of his introverted nature, it brought out the worst in him. I wonder if there had been an accident when he was young, a car accident, something like that. But in addition to a car accident or something that he witnessed or experienced that played a big role in his impression as a child, that carried forth, lending to his introversion or his inward world as an adult looking back. Oh, creepy. Well, friends, hopefully we'll never hear from him again. Until next time, friends, peace, stay well, be kind, and be brave.